Feel free coming.
Stephen Faulkner brings us Field Freak, also known as The Monster Outside, a 2016 low-budget horror comedy Bigfoot movie. What's the story? So it focuses on a family of 3 who are moving from the city to the country for kind of a 6-month period because the husband is an author and he kind of wants to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. So they buy this kind of cabin in the woods, I guess, that has been unoccupied for years. And when they get there, they find out that it's been unoccupied because there are rumours of a creature in the woods. And this creature is referred to as the Field Freak. And as the movie goes on, what are our family going to do about it? Pretty simple plot. Let's talk about what works. Let's start with the tone of this movie. So this is kind of a comedic tone. It's almost a spoof movie in places. Not completely, but there are certain scenes that I would say stray into spoof or parody kind of sequences. It does have a narrative. It does have an actual kind of normal flow of a story, but they're just sort of some more overly comedic scenes. And I have to say, I think it is, at least in part, quite amusing. Some of the kind of just the lines of dialogue here and the way that they are delivered, I have to say, was quite funny at times. For example, we have this young boy. He's the son of this kind of family, and he's probably about 7 or 8. And they go to this guy to buy some root beer, and he's making his root beer. It's sort of out in the kind of the country somewhere, and this guy is telling this family about the Field Freak, the Sasquatch creature, and he sort of says, "Oh, watch out, he'll bite your dick off." And it's just to this little boy, and it's just kind of quite funny. Just to give you an example, so there is some kind of quite fun sort of dialogue here. I also have to kind of, as part of that, talk about the style of acting here. Now, I don't know for sure if this was the case, but the acting is somewhat sort of goofy, and I've got the feeling it was done so on purpose. I mean, I've seen this critiqued as bad acting, and I guess it does look like that, so maybe we'll touch on it again, but I think it's on purpose, and it's kind of like a sort of silly, almost certain level of goofiness. But I think it kind of works for me. I actually found the characters almost like highlighted versions of real people, if that makes sense. They're kind of over-exaggerated, like this married couple. The husband's gets kind of berated by his wife. His wife's a bit of a taskmaster, and the guy is just a bit of a kind of a simp really, and a little bit of a gets kind of pushed around a little bit, but he's quite happy in that way. So I just kind of quite like these sort of characters who are quite sort of somewhat over the top without being ridiculously over the top, and it just makes for some kind of quite somewhat positive characters, I have to say, and some quite funny moments, just the way they sort of talk to each other and stuff. Now, again, this is a low-budget movie, and when we do see our Bigfoot creature, it isn't the best, but I have to say it's not the worst either. I actually think, again, we're judging it by the budget here. It's a guy in a suit. It isn't just like a gorilla suit like we have seen in some kind of movies and stuff. But I think it's okay for a kind of, if you're not expecting too much, I think it's okay for a sort of a low-budget movie. The story is pretty straightforward. It's nothing you haven't really seen before, but it is one of these films where I feel it's a little bit like comfort food. You can kind of sit back and kind of just watch this and kind of enjoy it without having to really sort of study it and pay it full attention. And, I have to say, when I watched this film, I was in kind of that mood. I've watched a lot of foreign language movies where you've got to concentrate because you've got to read the text. It's like, it was kind of nice just to kind of watch a film and just kind of like, I can kind of not concentrate too much on it. You're not kind of having to kind of follow it too much. And it's sometimes nice to kind of have a film like that to a degree. And for the last part, I think it's relatively kind of well paced. But yeah, it was just a kind of like an all right experience. You know, it was this movie. I was moderately entertained with it. So let's talk about what I think works or doesn't work. Sorry, in this film. So yeah, it is a low budget movie, and some people aren't gonna like the low budget aesthetic here. As much as I give credit for the suit, you know, it ultimately it isn't anything particularly kind of outstanding, and ultimately looks like a guy in a suit, which of course it is. So, you know, they wisely sort of don't show it too much. We really only get it run past the screen, which I think was the right move. But obviously you still see it, and it does look, you know, on the cheaper side, shall we call it. Now, I've kind of mentioned the acting, and a lot of people, I think, have just seen this as bad acting. And probably, if you're just looking at it, is it good acting? It probably isn't, you know. I think it works for the tone of the movie, which is kind of comedic and sort of somewhat spoofy, but these aren't exactly dramatic performances. And the sort of goofy tone, I think, may put some people off. The movie is distinctly lacking in the horror element here. This creature, in a way, seems quite brutal, because it seems to want to kind of rip people's legs off. It does it to more than one person. But I never really feel like we get much of a danger threat from it. We never actually see it kill anyone. It's never really particularly kind of gory. It's never particularly like violent necessarily. It's lots of sort of like, you know, we get told it's killed this family years before. But it never actually kills anyone in this movie. It only wounds people. And I think it could have done with maybe dialing up the horror a little bit, having a little bit more kind of, having maybe a couple more attacks, maybe just a hiker in the woods or something like that to give it a little bit more agency, because it does lack in that department. Now, the comedy by nature is subjective. So I actually found this, or at least parts of this movie, amusing. But there is like other parts where I found like it way laboured on the joke too much. For example, they hire an exterminator that's convinced every problem is to do with a beaver, and they just really, really stay on this joke for just too long. It's just like, oh God, it's just like, it's kind of painful because we're just labouring on this joke. And there's a few instances where that, right, I just, for me at least, the humour didn't really work, and you know, it's just like, you know. But some may find that joke, for example, funny. To me, it didn't really work. And it just has a general sort of lower budget movie kind of feel to it, if I'm honest. You do see the sort of the lack of resources somewhat kind of apparent in this film. Yeah. Overall, do you know what? I still kind of enjoyed it. This was, like I said, a nice comfort food style movie. But, critical hat on, is it a good movie? Probably not. I would probably say, if we're looking at it with a critical hat on, I would probably say it is arguably a slightly below average movie, but I don't think it would stray into being a bad film, or at least not a legitimately bad film. It's trying to be somewhat of a goofy, schlocky B movie, but in that respect I do think it works. So if you are a fan of like the B movie, you may want to check it out. I'll say 4 out of 10 for me. I can't quite say it's a legitimately good film, but I would say there is an entertainment value to be had here. Have you seen Field Freak? Please do let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll see you next time.